Hi there, it's Tracy Kiernan, and this acrylic painting tutorial is going to show you how to paint a haunted bouquet with acrylics on a 9x12 canvas. So this is a super easy beginner level painting, a fun one, Halloween themed flower bouquet. Lots of customization can happen with this, and this one is a fun one to paint the sides. I did dark purple and orange stripes on the sides, but you are definitely welcome to change that pattern if you want. Let's go over brushes and colors. So we'll be using the 3/4 flat, the number 12 bright brush. This one's a Royal and Langnickel brush. This one's a Princeton Velvet Touch brush, number 4 round brush. And toothbrush is optional, but I did some fun little splatters everywhere after I was done painting this. So that's something you can do. Paper plate for paint palette. And there are 7 colors. These are the Liquitex Basics acrylics. So Hooker's Green Hue, Mars Black, Titanium White, Cad Yellow Deep, Quinacridone Magenta, Dioxazine Purple, and Cad Red Light Hue. So if you don't have Cad Red Light Hue, you can use orange. I just happened to grab this because I was out of my orange paint, so that's why I'm using that one. We are going to go ahead and get started, and I say this for all my tutorials, you do not have to use the exact supplies I'm using. Use whatever you have available. And let's get started. So I'm doing 9x12. Again, you can use a different size canvas. You can do the 11x14. This works on any size. The background is a very, very simple abstract background of 2 colors. It's Dioxazine Purple and Titanium White. And I'll be using the 3/4 flat brush. So I'm going to load that into the water and grab the purple. So we want our background to be dark along the edges and just have this bright center. So that's an effect that we can do with our background. If we have like our main object is in the center of the canvas, in this case it's a bouquet, having a bright background in the center is going to allow our objects in the center to have contrast because we have this kind of light colored glow in the center. So that's a common simple kind of background effect that we can do for different kind of painting designs. And so you want to just kind of fill up all of the edges, and you're doing big angle paint strokes. You can add a little bit of water to your brush if you want. The background should not be thick. It's a thin layer, but if you are adding water, you just want to make sure it's not too thin. It shouldn't be dripping. So leave the center part of the canvas blank for now. You can take this and you can drag it towards the center, but leave just like a big white blob of leftover space in the center because we will be blending that white in there. So when you have, for the most part, the edges painted, grab your white, and you want to do this before it dries because we want to do wet on wet blending. If it dries, we won't be able to blend it. But start by adding just a little bit of white to your brush at first and start blending that. So you're kind of just doing the same thing. You're just kind of big angle paint strokes, blending that color, and it's creating this light color. White blends so beautifully with the purple. It creates different variations of this dioxazine purple. So it's such a fun color to work with. So you can kind of figure out, okay, well, I need more white or I need more purple. It's blending too lightly. You might find that you want to rinse the brush and kind of start things over or wipe the brush. So you're going to have to kind of determine that I'm going to put some more purple on my brush and get this area up here. So again, we want the edges to be dark. We want the center to be bright. Big paint strokes. If your white drags up all the way to the top, to the edges, that is okay. Your background will look different from mine, and when the whole painting is done, we're not really going to be focused much on the background. So there's really no way you can mess the background up. I'm going to take more white, blend this in there, and I am going to try not to overblend it. I like seeing those big expressive brush strokes. It really sets the fun theme for this painting. When you are done with your background, let it dry before going on to this next step. In this next step, we will be drawing the pumpkin. So I'll be using a piece of chalk to draw the pumpkin. And the height of this pumpkin is about a third of the canvas. So I'm using my hands to kind of figure out where the third mark is. If you want, you can go ahead and measure where it is at 1/3. Then I'm going to draw the center sort of oval of the pumpkin. So I like to start in the center when drawing these pumpkins, and we only see the top half of this pumpkin. After the center oval, do 2 more curved lines on each side, so that gives you the side sort of bumps of the pumpkin, and then 2 more, and they kind of gradually get smaller. So I only did 5. So there's the oval and then the 2 and the 2, so 5 little sections for the pumpkin. And that's it for the drawing part. Chalk will erase after we paint it in. And we're going to do a white pumpkin. If you want, you can do an orange pumpkin. And so we need the color Titanium White and Mars Black on our paint palette. And I'm going to be using the number 12 bright brush. So load your brush in just the titanium white. So if you're doing an orange pumpkin, you want to do the same thing that I'm doing here. You want to do your first layer white regardless if you're doing a colored pumpkin or not. And just go ahead and paint that center sort of oval shape. In this case, it's like a half or a 3/4 shaped oval. And I am going to kind of not go all the way in the lines of my drawing. I'm actually making the pumpkin just slightly smaller, shorter. Then do your next curve, and you want to go in the direction of that curve. So this one over here goes opposite. And so you're just dragging your brush down in a curved direction, and you're leaving a little gap. That little purple from the background is showing through, and that's showing some kind of shadowing already for that part of the pumpkin. And the other 2 bumps, you start at the top and you just drag your brush down all the way to the bottom edge, leaving just a little bit of purple showing through where those kind of lines are when we drew our pumpkin lines. Without rinsing the brush, add just a very tiny amount of black on your brush. You only want a small amount for this. And I'm going to go back kind of where we left that purple showing, and I'm going to use that black to kind of define those lines, that dark shadowy part in between the pumpkin bumps. So those are those lines, and just a little bit of black, and I'm actually letting it blend with that white a little bit, since my pumpkin is going to be like a white or light gray color. I want that black to just kind of blend in a little bit. Oop, too much. So you want to make sure you're only using little tiny bits. If it's too much black, wipe it off and make sure you only have a little bit of black. I only have black like on the corner of my brush. I'm just gently blending that black in towards the bottom of that pumpkin and kind of dragging it into that white. It creates some shading and texture. And we're blending it, but we're leaving it unblended, so not all the way, so we get that kind of different variation in that light gray color. So it's a little bit shadowy on the bottom, and it's shadowy in between those lines. So if you're doing an orange pumpkin, you can probably still do the black lines, but add, after the white dries, add your orange layer over your white, but still do black for shadowing. You want to go ahead and let this dry, and after this dries, erase any leftover chalk lines. So I'm just going to use a clean, wet 3/4 flat brush to go in here. You may not have chalk lines showing. You may have painted it in and the chalk lines disappeared, but if you do have any chalk lines still showing, that erases with a paintbrush to kind of clean that up a little bit. I didn't do a lot of details at the top of the pumpkin because I know there's going to be flowers covering that area, and I can have those flowers disguise all of that, if that makes sense. And so I'm going to load my palette. I'm going to be doing the flowers next, or the base of our roses next. So we have Quinacridone Magenta, Cad Yellow Deep, And this is the Cad Red Light Hue. I was out of Cad Orange Hue, so I grabbed that one. If you have Cad Orange Hue, you can use that, or whatever color, whatever orange color you have available. And titanium white. I will be using the number 4 round brush for this. And you just want to make sure everything's dry before doing this because we don't want to smear the pumpkin. So let's start with yellow and white. And so mixed equal parts yellow and white together. And I'm going to form this yellow rose over here. It's going to be overlapping part of the top of the pumpkin. Start in the center and just do these little curved paint strokes. And then do more curved paint strokes around that. And as you're curving these strokes, each one is kind of slightly overlapping them, and you're just forming your rose shape by doing curved strokes outwards to form the rose bud. So there's my first rose. It's kind of at an angle on its side. And I'm going to do another one, and this time without rinsing my brush, I'm going to do the Cad Red Light or the orange color. So load my brush in that color. You want to add white into your color, and that's because we're working on a dark background, and a lot of these kind of warm yellows and oranges tend to be opaque colors. Adding a little bit of white in there is going to help give us coverage and help make our rose look brighter. So this one's going to be over here to the right. Again, start in the center, curved strokes. You're pressing down on those on the brush. So you're doing that C kind of stroke, pressing down and kind of releasing the pressure so that the beginning of the stroke is kind of thin, and then you're pressing down, it's thick, and then you're kind of releasing the pressure. That's called a comma stroke. And a little bit of white in there. Go in and maybe just kind of highlight this a little bit, although this isn't, we're going to add more highlight and shading to this later. But sometimes it's fun to just take that white and highlight it before it dries so that it blends wet on wet. So forming my rose shape. And then we can do our next rose. I'm actually not going to rinse my brush for this one either. I'm going to grab the Quinacridone Magenta. So this is going to be magenta mixed with orange. And we're going to place this one over here. If you need to add white to this, you can. Start in the center, do your comma strokes, form your rose shape going outwards. This next rose color, I am going to make it kind of a lighter pale color. And so without rinsing the brush, I'm going to grab white and I'm going to actually mix all that together. So this is white, quinacridone, and Cad Red Light all mixed together to make this really pretty peach color. And this rose is going to be up here. Same technique, starting in the center. Do your comma strokes outwards to form your rose shape. So right here, I'm adding a little orange to my brush, going back in the center and doing kind of this darker layer so that my petals will kind of show up, because that one ended up being more of a solid color. And I'm going to leave that alone and not blend it anymore. And I'm going to make another color. This is going to be Quinacridone Magenta mixed with Cad Red Light. So it's going to be very similar to that other magenta colored rose, only it's going to have a little bit more orange to it. Could add a little yellow into that as well. Sometimes it's fun just to make up colors. You don't have to copy these colors. You can do your own colors, and you can also change the placement of your roses. I just happen to make my roses go into this kind of like circular direction They're kind of all forming this circle with the kind of a gap in the middle. Just kind of happened that way. And so, same thing, start in the center, do your comma strokes, form the shape of the rose. It's okay if we don't see the petals right away because we are going to be going back and detailing those roses later. So we need a circle. I'm going to add little black dots in the center of all of our roses. So ideally, the roses should not be super wet right now because the black will smudge too much. Mine are not completely dry, but they're also not soaking wet. So I'm going to take a clean number 4 round brush and the black, and in the center of each of these roses, I'm going to paint little black dots. So I'm just loading the black right there on the end of the bristles and just dotting little bunches of black dots. So I'm going to do this to each of the flowers. Next, I'm going to rinse the brush off and do some other things that are going to be in the bouquet. So I want my roses to dry before I can detail them up any further. And let's do the little skulls next. I'm going to load my number 4 round brush into some clean titanium white paint. And I'm going to place this little guy right in the center. So it's just a simple circle and then kind of a sort of square shape below the circle. If you want to get realistic with the skulls, you can. I'm just going to make these really simple illustrative type of skulls. So there's our first one. And then I'm going to do a second one. So depending on the placement of your flowers, you might end up placing these in different areas, and that's okay. This guy is going to be kind of hanging out over here on the left. Circle, and then I did more of a rounded jaw shape for that one, which I kind of like better, so I'm going to make this one rounded too. And because this is a Halloween themed bouquet, I'm going to do bats in there as well. You're welcome to do little jack-o'-lanterns or ghosts or anything else that you want to customize with. So I'm going to rinse the brush and use Mars Black to do the bats. So this one over here on the right is going to be, let's start out by doing like an oval shape for the body, and then a little tiny kind of small circle for the head, and then do little pointed ears. I realize it's a small detail. If you want, you can use the black paint pen to do these bats. And then I'm going to do the wings. So 2 curves going to a point, the bottom one, 3 curves going to 2 points, and you just want to fill it in. So 1 curve, 2 curve, the bottom one, 3 curves. And then fill this in. We can decide maybe a wing might be overlapping a flower, or I'm just going to have maybe this flower overlap the wing. And then this bat is decoration, so it's attached to a stick, which is hanging out with the pumpkin. I did black, but if it's kind of a dark area of the background, you may want to add a little white to it for contrast. And then I'm going to do a second bat over here on the left. So same process, do the head and body, pointed ears, and then do your wings. I'm going to do some highlighting on the bats with titanium white. So without rinsing my brush, grab some white and I'm just going to loosely outline some of the edges of this. So this is really going to help get that to stand out, especially in an area where it's dark in the background. So I'm just taking that white and I'm picking some of the edges of the shape and outlining that. It does blend a little bit with the black because that black is not dried yet, but it's just enough to give it that pop of highlight to get that to stand out. We are going to do the highlighting details on our roses next. So let's rinse our brush off and let's start with the yellow rose on the bottom. Basically the same order that we painted our roses. So I'm going to start with this one and I want to mix a light yellow. So I'm going to take a bunch of white and add just a little bit of yellow to this. So this is not pure white, it's light yellow. So you want it to be brighter but not pure white, if that makes sense. And I'm just going to go back. I'm not going to paint over my little black dots. I'm going to do my little curved comma strokes around that. And I'm going to reform my rose petal shapes. And this light color is going to create the highlight of my petals. It's going to look decorative and not realistic, but we have that dark layer still showing through. So I don't want to cover all that dark layer. That dark layer is providing shadowing. I'm going to do my magenta rose on top of this one next. So take your magenta and add white into it so you get a lighter tint of that color. Start in the center around the little black dots and do your little curved strokes. So again, this should be bright but not pure white. And do your little comma strokes. This is actually getting some pretty orange tints in there because I didn't rinse my brush. Did a little bit more white over here on the edges. And I'm going to go back and add magenta back over that because I don't like how that ended up being more of a pure white color. It's important not to overdo this, so sometimes it's tempting to just keep painting curved strokes, and then if you do that, it's just going to kind of all blend to be the same color, and we don't really want that. I'm going to do this orange one next, so orange and white, start in the center, do your little curved paint strokes. Again, you don't want it too bright, and then outwards. Gives that highlight for your rose petals. And then I'm going to do this one, magenta one again. So adding magenta and white. And then we have this rose up here at the top, which we kind of already did some highlights, or I did highlights when I painted this one initially, but I can still go back and do some more with this lighter color. It's not showing up, so I'm going to grab a little bit more white, go in there and do the light color petals. Now this next step is optional. I'm actually going to go in there and add some black lining into the flowers, some thin black lines, not thick paint strokes like what I just did. So I'm going to rinse my brush off and then load just a tip of it and just a teeny bit of black. We want these lines to be kind of thin, but I'm just going in there. This is the part, so I'm going in there only like not over the light colored strokes, but kind of between them. Gives it a little bit of outlining, but also it's a Halloween painting, so little bits of black in our flowers is okay for this. There are two daisy type of flowers in this, and so I'm going to rinse the brush and I'm going to paint those next. We need to make a brown, and there's no brown on our palette, so we can mix a brown. I'm going to take quinacridone and yellow, mix those two together to get kind of an orange and purple. So I'm mixing orange and purple together. It's going to create your brownish color when you mix the orange and the purple. And then add a teeny tiny bit of black to it, and that's going to darken that color. If all else fails, you can just do a black center for these flowers. And I'm going to do a little cone shape for the center. So I'm going to do my two flowers up here. Yours might be in different spots. I'm going to do a little kind of cone shape or more like an oval shape, and do another oval next to it over here. Again, your placement might be different. And then I'm going to rinse and do the petals. So I'm going to load some new Cad Yellow Deep onto my paint palette, and I want to dry these really quick because I don't want any of my brown to smear into that yellow. So these flowers are kind of on their sides, so when we do our petals, also we want to mix a little bit of white into our yellow so that it shows up nice and opaque. I'm going to do my bigger petals that are down here, kind of the front ones. So you're kind of doing that comma stroke again. You're kind of little pressure at first, press down, and then release the pressure. So this flower is on its side, so we see those petals under that, the cone middle shape, and I didn't do any behind, although we could do some smaller petals to make it look like there are petals going behind there. I'm going to do the second one here, so same thing, just kind of dragging your paint stroke down, and that direction is going to change depending on what side of the flower you're on. So these are those little tiny petals I was talking about, so maybe there's some that are kind of going behind that shape, so you can do little tiny curved lines. And we can go and highlight this a bit. Maybe I can take some white and kind of go back over some of those petals to lighten them up. But keep in mind, the style of this painting is illustrative, decorative, so we don't need to focus on making these flowers look realistic. I'm going to take my brown and add a little bit of white to the brown, and I just want to kind of add some texture in that center kind of top part of that of the daisies or cone flowers or whatever these kind of flowers are, wild flowers. Add a little bit of black on the bottom, and I'm going to go back with my white and add a little bit of light color on the petals again. So just on the bottom parts, give that a little bit of texture. That yellow is not dry all the way, so it is blending a little bit with that yellow. So just some thin kind of lines on the ends of the petals. Next, we are going to work on the greenery in this. So this is all going to be Hooker's Green Hue, but we're going to mix that green in with some other things to make different variations of green. I'm going to rinse my 4-round brush, and let's use our green to do our first little leaf piece. And this one, I'm going to take my green and mix white into it. I added just a teeny bit of water in there to kind of loosen that up because this is going to be thin detail work, and adding just a little bit of water in there helps with the flow of the paint. This is going to be like a little leaf spray coming down and just that center line, and then there's going to be little leaves. So there's one leaf on the end of that line, and then there's leaves on each side. So I'm creating different variations of that green by loading my brush in the green, but then adding a little bit of white to it. So some of the leaves appear darker, some lighter. I'm going to add a little bit of black to my green next to create this next set of leaves. So this is kind of a grayish green. So make sure if you add black, add just a little bit more white in there too to make it more of a gray green. And then, so I'm twisting my brush here because I'm going to do some pointed leaves, and that helps to kind of distribute and get your bristles all together for painting these. But these are going to be little tiny, well, they're not tiny, kind of medium-sized leaves, little elongated pointed leaves. And I'm doing these kind of coming out from the roses. So that's sort of overlapping that top part of the pumpkin. Again, color variation. So reloading the brush in different amount of green that time allowed that other leaf to stand out or look slightly different from the other one. And then we have all these gaps we want to kind of fill up. So in between the roses and kind of where you have open spaces, you can do little kind of smaller leaves. And then creating another leaf that's kind of hanging out from the rose here. If you add just a bit more black into that green, don't make it like black, but really, really dark green, that creates a very kind of moody, dramatic green. I like how that looks. So really, our goal now is to utilize this greenery to really kind of fill up our gaps. It gives that full look in our bouquet. I'm going to do some twisty vine-like greenery in this, and perhaps maybe this is part of the pumpkin. I'm going to take my green, I'm going to do that dark green color. I'm going to kind of water this down just a little bit to get this flowy enough so that I can do this twisty sort of vine thing. So I did one over here under that flower. I'm going to do another one over here on the left. So it's a really fun thing we can add. You can add more kind of throughout the bouquet if you like how that looks. And then I'm just going to continue and paint more leaves. Some of these kind of in the gaps, you may not even see the full leaf. Maybe they're just little kind of small paint strokes. I'm going to add yellow into some of these just for fun. I'm taking yellow and just kind of maybe almost dry brushing that color lightly over some of these leaves. Again, for the purpose of creating some variation of color. It also gives my leaves a little bit more dimension in the painting so it's not flat. We could do some stems, so maybe we see a little bit of these wildflower stems. Maybe we can experiment with the white and kind of highlight one side of some of these leaves. Just gives that some fun depth of color. I'm going to do the eyes, nose, mouth on the skulls next. So this can also be done with a paint pen black Sharpie because it's such a fine detail. But I'm going to use the 4 round brush and the Mars black, and I'm going to go in there and paint little eyes, kind of oval going at an angle. And then the nose, you can think of it like an upside down heart. And then I'm going to do a simple mouth with teeth. And I'm going to do the same thing for this little skull. The skulls are attached to like little sticks. You can paint the lines or you can just leave them blank. For the most part, my leaves and flowers are covering where those sticks would be anyway. I'm going to do the spider web detail next, and this also works if you have a white paint pen. I'm going to just use the round brush for this. Twist the brush, get that paint right there on the edge of the bristles so you can get that fine detail control of the brush. And I'm going to start with the diagonal line. So I'm going to start at the corner and I'm going to take this line and attach it to the flower. Yours might be attached to something else, or maybe it's not attached to anything. It just kind of is a line that just kind of doesn't, like those two lines aren't really attached to anything. So I'm going to do 3 diagonal lines and then do the web line on those. So you can kind of see how that's forming the spider web. And then another set of curved webbed lines after that. I'm going to take those diagonals and actually attach both of them to something, and this one's actually going to extend all the way to this leaf. And just for fun, I'm going to take the white and do little white kind of dots on the top of both of these centers of these flowers. I'm going to do another spider web. So this one's going to be kind of lower right area. You can do spider webs all over. You can paint a cute little spider attached to one of the webs. So this is just lots of fun Halloween themed elements. I didn't make this one even, so this one's going to go this way. So I started with the curved web lines and then did the diagonal lines. You could do it that way. This one is just fitting in that little area. I am going to do a little boo lettering. It's supposed to be the word boo attached to a stick inside the bouquet. You can change this to something else. I just needed something kind of in the upper left area because it's kind of blank. So if you want to do like a quote in that area or something else, a little ghost, again, that's all free for you to customize. So I'm taking the yellow, the Cad Yellow Deep, add a little bit of white in there so it shows up. And I'm just going to do the word boo with an exclamation point. I'm going to do the little stick that's attached to this. I'm going to rinse, and we can use black or white or gray, whatever color is going to show up. And then I'm going to take my black and I want to do some shadowing kind of inside the letters, although you don't have to really do this. If you want to outline the letters, you can, but I was trying to make them look a little bit three-dimensional by taking that black and outlining some of the edges. I'm going to add more details to my bouquet. That is the fun thing about doing these floral paintings, is you just keep building on it and filling it up until it's nice and full and fun and colorful. So I'm going to take my green and yellow and do, maybe there's another spiral kind of leaf or vine thing up here at the top. And then we can fill in some of these other gaps. We can do maybe adding some lighter color on some of the leaves, so highlighting some of those leaves that are already there. I'm going to take my dark green and go in there and do some small little kind of abstract paint strokes in there just to fill in some of those gaps. I'm going to go even darker here and add just a bit more black in there, and I'm just doing little kind of dotted paint strokes in there, add some dark in between some of the flowers. And then I'm going to take my black and maybe outline the bottoms of some of these roses. I outlined the ones that are overlapping the pumpkins, and then I'm just outlining the bottom parts of these up here. Just a little bit of outline on the bottom parts of some of the leaves. Especially right here, kind of gets that to pop a little bit. This next thing I'm going to do is optional. I'm actually going to go back over my pumpkin again with pure white and the 12 bright. I'm just going to kind of add a second coat in there, but I don't want to cover up all of that shading. I'm just kind of lightly adding some bright color in there just to give that little bit of brightness and second layer of bright white on the pumpkin. And then this is also optional, but I'm going to do some splatters. Kind of, we can do it all over, but just a fun little texture in the background. And another detail we can do is add another little skull up here. I mentioned at the beginning of this video that it's fun to paint the sides of this one something fun and funky. I'm not going to show it on camera, but what I'm doing here is I'm just using black and purple and using the 3/4 flat just to paint the sides. After this dries, I'm going to do white stripes, and then when the white stripes dry, I'll do orange over the white. So that's how I can get the orange and kind of dark purple black stripes on the side. But again, you're welcome to change that design as well. This would also be a fun one to add glitter to if you want to add glitter like on the skulls or on the bats. But that is it. This is the conclusion of how to paint the Halloween bouquet. Hope you enjoyed this one. Thanks for watching, and thanks for painting with me.